Downtown Los Angeles.
Back in the 1970s, one of the first sports talk show hosts in Southern California was a fellow named Ed Beeler. KABC listeners knew him much better as Superfan. In addition to his sports talk show, Superfan took a fling as a color commentator on football broadcasts. Ed, was that with the Express or the Southern California Sun?
The Southern California Sun. Tom Kelly was the play-by-play guy. It was my first experience, and I was the color man. And we were in San Antonio, and I had the night before had a wonderful time going along the river, you know, and they had the mariachis and all that, and we had a few brews along the way. And so the next day was as I say, my first experience as a color guy. So I was all prepared to set the stage. And so I talked about the San Antonio River and that type of thing. And then I somehow said that the San Antonio River flows through the heart of Los Angeles. And that's all Jim Healy needed.
You got that right, because from that point on, every time the city of San Antonio was mentioned on his program, he played that voice track. How did you feel about that?
At first, I thought it was comical. I thought it was cute, and I really thought that he had captured my nervousness and all the rest of it. But then, after a while, it got very, very old, and it got under my skin. As a matter of fact, there was one time, Healy at that point was doing fights at the Olympic Auditorium, and he had played it just prior on his show, prior to doing the fights. And I was so incensed, for whatever reason, I have a bad temper anyway, as the industry knows, and I ran out to the Olympic Auditorium trying to confront him. The publicist tipped Healy off that I was on my way. He went out the back door as I came in the front door. It would have been horrible, but I'm glad he went.
So you never did confront him?
We met at the racetrack. And he seemed to be such a quiet, mellow gentleman. And I said to myself, is this the Healy that uses all that Tommy Lasorda and Ed Beeler stuff on the air? And we talked, and we had a good time. And the next night, he crucified me.
Dateline, Washington, D.C. Former Indiana star Calbert Cheney's out 3 weeks with a left foot injury. So the desperate Washington Bullets signed 7-7 Manute Bol, dropped almost a month ago by Miami.
Say what?
Manute Bol, though the former KABC radio sports talk host here, said it differently the time he was giving a rundown on NBA Sunday.
Well, let me tell you what I think. I think Kareem should have retired years ago, and I don't know that Michael Thompson is the guy to go head-to-head with the Elijah ones and the New York Knicks center, Patrick...
Ewing.
Pat Ewing, and, Manuel Boat.
Blow it out.
Hey, you, listen, bub. Don't forget Johnny's Freeway Club. Wonderful music, sure to please. The latest traffic advisories to help you relax and drive with ease. Don't let yourself get woe gone. Perk up and listen to Johnny Grant.
Johnny Grant was the first disc jockey with a regularly scheduled show on KMPC. His Freeway Club helped afternoon commuters get home. In later years, as honorary mayor of Hollywood, Grant emceed hundreds of luncheons and dinners. It was at one of those political fundraisers that Johnny unknowingly contributed to the Healy soundtrack collection.
Well, I did. I was doing a dinner for President Bush, and dinner was over, and I was just starting the program and was in the middle of an introduction to Bob Hope. And all of a sudden, a couple of activists who had bought, I understand, their tickets with bad checks. Anyway, that's how they got into the room, and they jumped up and started yelling and protesting, and I stood there for a minute thinking, now, what are you going to say and how are you going to stop this? And I said, it is a presidential dinner. You know, you got to be careful what you do here. But anyway, I got fired up enough that I just said, blow it out. I really wanted to finish the line, but I didn't. And I thought nothing of it. And the next day when I got to my office, people were calling me. I guess they had recorded it, as they record everything that's said in the room when a president is there, and that is from the podium. And I understand that somehow they got it, and Robert W. found out about it, Morgan. And I guess he used it first and then gave it to Healy, or at least that's the way I understand it.
Blow it out.
In commercial radio, the sponsor is the lifeblood of the station. And Jim Healy brought in sponsors. Bob Anderson, longtime manager of the Southern California Chevrolet Dealers Association, advertised on Healy shows for years. Bob, why was Jim such a good buy in the highly competitive world of automotive advertising?
Well, it's best summed up with two words. One is loyalty. He had a very loyal audience. And another word, very important, believability. People believed what Jim Healy said, and they enjoyed what he said. That's a great combination. So there was a receptive pattern there to receive our commercial message, and that's very rare.
And because of that huge audience, he gained high ratings, and that enabled the stations to charge more for a commercial on his show than at other time periods. But it was worth it.
Oh, absolutely. You can't judge an audience like that strictly on a cost per thousand basis or things like that. He had the audience. You knew the audience was going to... And one thing important, Steve, the audience stayed with Healy. They didn't tune it out or tune it in. There wasn't any zapping with Jim. Everybody wanted to listen to the entire show.
So the bottom line is that Jim Healy helped you sell a lot of cars.
Sell a lot of Chevrolets, a lot of Geos for a long, long time.
Well, I'm not surprised he did such a good selling job, because Healy learned to read commercials at the feet of that legendary Canadian sportscaster Moose Jaw McGillicuddy. Now, Moose Jaw was sort of the Ed McMahon of Upper Canada. Here's an example of his great selling ability.
If you drop in at Patterson Motors used car lot in the middle of our 600 block west west on Main Street today or any other day, if you are in the market for a used car, you will have to agree that we have a real bunch of bargain buys on our lot. One thing, you don't need any pay to excuse me. You don't have to you don't need any X-ray to find the value of a Goodwill card. Today we are putting the spotlight on a Corvair 1960 sedan with a 1960 radio, undercoated, minors, mirrors, a gold paint job, and after you drive it, you'll say, no fooling, it's a dandy. And now for Patterson Motors, may we say to you until tomorrow morning at this very same time, so long, and thanks for listening.
Steve, how can I get in touch with that fellow?
I don't know, Bob, but I do know that Moose Jaw was a contribution to the Healy Library by one of the truly great talents in our industry, Mr. Gary Owens. Well, this was one of Jim's favorite big bands, the great Count Basie Orchestra with the Neil Hefti tune, The Kid from Red Bank. Red Bank was the Count's hometown in New Jersey. And another lad originally from Jersey, Mr. Vin Scully, will be heard on the other side of this timeout. We'll also turn the spotlight on Mr. Howard Cosell. One of Jim's favorite voice tracks contained only 4 words by one of the most well-known and popular voices in Southern California.
I can't believe it.
Vin, you've spoken millions and millions of words into a microphone over the years. Can you recall the circumstances when you first spoke that famous phrase?
You know, Steve, I really don't know. And every time I heard it, I would laugh. And then I would try to think, where in the world did he come up with that? And the only thing I can think of, because I don't believe I ever said it on the air, it must have been either during a commercial session and somebody used it. I just really don't know. But, of course, he was remarkable in coming up with all these things and then getting him on the air in the proper sequence.
I recall a few years ago, Jim indicated or suggested that you might be losing some of your enthusiasm, and I know that you responded right away.
One time he said something to that effect, and I wrote him a letter. And in the letter, I used all of the soundtracks that he uses on his show. And I wound up saying, I can't believe it, And a night or two later, after he got the letter, he said Scully had the last word. It figured. We had a very pleasant ongoing relationship. I know he was acid-tongued and acerbic and all of those other words to an awful lot of people. I must say, he was very kind to me.
And is that the way you'll remember him?
I will, because, you see, we shared the same barber, and so he will never die. Anytime I go to get a haircut, why, Bob and I will talk about Jim.
As much as Healy loved Vin Scully, he despised Howard Cosell.